I think one of the reasons that he wanted me to kill the next girl was to make me more involved. He wasn't loving. He acted like he didn't care that we got married. He told me that he was a Scarborough rapist. And it just was not like the kind of wedding night that I was dreaming of having.
I had some real doubts about the battered spouse syndrome.
This is the most difficult because it's my little sister. Paul approached me wanting to have sex with Tammy. I put some halothane on a cloth and I held it near her face.
Did you ever get caught? No, never. Why? They say. I'm a deadly innocent guy. You ever get caught? No, never, never. Why?
Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo had the kind of fairy tale wedding many people only dream about. A horse-pulled carriage, a lavish ceremony with hundreds of people, and nothing but smiles on their faces. It was the day of their dreams. Yet, just a few miles away at the very same time, law enforcement in St. Catharines, Ontario discovered something that was straight out of a nightmare. A fisherman called the department to report that he had found large concrete blocks at the pond's edge. Inside a crack in the concrete, he could see what appeared to be decaying human flesh. He hoped that he was wrong and that this was some kind of prank, but the reality was that this was anything but. Inside was the torso of the dismembered body of 14-year-old student Leslie Mahaffey, who'd been missing for 2 weeks. Leslie was a vibrant, funny, and intelligent girl who by all accounts had a bright future ahead of her. She longed to be a marine biologist when she grew up, but tragically, she was never given the chance. And this was because the very day that her body was found, her killers were meanwhile exchanging vows with each other. Little did the congregation know that Karla and Paul had already made a much more twisted promise to one another. And it wouldn't be the last of their dark promises.
So he wanted her right beside him so he could hold the knife to her. And I sat in the back seat, actually more in the middle of the two of the front seats. And I held her hair and I held her head down.
Karla Homolka was 17 when she met 23-year-old junior accountant Paul Bernardo at a pet store conference in Scarborough, Ontario. After flirting over drinks, they slunk up to a hotel room to be intimate for the first time, and this was within just 2 hours of meeting. It was immediate fireworks. According to Karla's friends and family, Paul was everything she had ever dreamed of, and also everything that they had ever dreamed for her.
He took care of her, he took her places, he just seemed to be wonderful for her. She was in love, head over heels.
However, unbeknownst to Karla's loving family or friends, Paul had been hiding a dark secret. Between 1987 and 1990, a vicious rapist stalked the streets of Scarborough after dark, attacking school-aged girls in their backyards, behind buildings, and even in their own homes. A total of 14 rapes took place, and another 6 were attempted. Yet, as the rapes continued to escalate, Karla and Paul, despite this, were having the times of their lives together. Paul delighted in brutally dominating Karla in bed, and Karla, a seemingly willing participant in his degradation and dark fantasies.
They had a little dog chain too, like a dog necklace with the little spikes on, not spikes, but little.
A dog collar.
Dog collar. And
that she wore.
Very submissive.
And interestingly enough, you'd walk into a room and in the back door would be a lace teddy and a pair of handcuffs.
Did she talk about this in a horrible way, like I hate this kind of sex we're having?
No.
What did she say about it?
It was just matter of fact.
It was just the best thing in the world.
Karla thought it was so good, in fact, that she left love letters for Paul on his pillow every single day. Paul's appetite for demented and non-consensual sexual encounters only continued to grow. He would eventually tell Karla that he wanted her little sister Tammy.
Want to hold it?
Yeah. Before no, you don't hold it.
Can you see me? Yeah.
Tammy Lynn Homolka was just 14 years old when Paul began to tell Karla that he wanted to have sex with her. While such a suggestion would repulse any sane person, Karla leaned into it. In fact, she welcomed this desire of Paul's and also fantasized about it with him. Tammy had her whole life ahead of her, and instead of doing things that big sisters typically would, like taking her shopping, guiding her, and being a pillar of support at her tender age, Karla instead did just the opposite, telling Paul that he deserved her little sister's virginity, even pretending to be Tammy during sex to appease him. And instead of protecting her as a big sister should, she went on to use Tammy to gain favor with Paul. But soon, Karla pretending to be her 14-year-old younger sister just wasn't enough, and Paul's hunger to turn his sexual fantasies into a reality were growing stronger by the day.
He kept on pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally I said okay, and thinking that it wouldn't be, it would just be one time, that's it. It would shut him up, and he would stop bothering me and stop hurting me. We needed the halothane. I guess it would probably be me knowing more about anesthetics and the fact that sleeping pills might not keep her completely asleep. This was my idea, not his, was to call the drugstore and tell them that I needed it for clinic use. The reason I told them for clinic use was because that way I didn't have to give a name. All I had to do was give a doctor's name.
At the time, Karla worked at a veterinary office, giving her access to sedatives like halothane, a dangerous liquid anesthetic that can stop breathing. Karla and Paul concocted a plan where Karla would steal the substance from work, after which they would drug Tammy with it.
Here you go. Take this.
Allowing Paul to do what he wanted with her while she was unconscious. Bizarrely, Karla was reported to have told Paul around this time that she was giving her little sister's virginity to him as a Christmas gift. She clearly states that this was her idea and not Paul's. Yet, throughout the footage, you will see that Karla plays the victim. She states that she had no choice but to go through with Paul's plan because she feared he would hurt her. This Christmas Eve party is when Paul told Karla that it was time to enact their plan. And the footage that you see here was filmed when Tammy was unknowingly sipping a drink laced with tranquilizers. Tragically, this would be the second last piece of footage of Tammy alive. And just hours later, Karla would use the same camera that she used to film this footage to record the brutal assault of her little sister.
But this is the most difficult because it's my little sister. Paul approached me wanting to have sex with Tammy. I put some halothane on a cloth and I held it near her face. And Paul raped her. He had vaginal intercourse with her and anal intercourse with her. He made me have oral intercourse with her. And then she threw up. Like she stopped breathing then.
But Karla didn't just hold the cloth near Tammy's face. She pressed the chemical-soaked cloth against her sister's mouth and nose, leaving chemical burns on her body. True to her sociopathic nature, Karla to this day refuses to take even a morsel of accountability for this particular action.
Those burns are possibly chemical in nature and antemortem.
The only chemical that was near her was the halothane. It was not placed on her face directly. It was held, as I said, like this far away.
Paul and Karla brutally violated Tammy, and when she began to choke on her own vomit during the attack, they did nothing to save her. Instead, they redressed her, dragged her to her bed, and staged it to look as though Tammy had too much to drink and died as a result. After strategically positioning her body, they called 911. And during this time, Paul had lied to the authorities, claiming that he had tried to revive Tammy to no avail. And because no autopsy was done immediately after Tammy's death, and despite the burns on her face, it was ruled an accident. As Karla's family mourned the loss of Tammy, bizarrely, Karla was instead sulking about the lack of attention that her upcoming wedding was getting, and she needed someone to blame. And just a few weeks after the death of her baby sister, Karla would send this letter to a friend.
Fuck my parents. They already took away half the wedding money. They're being so stupid. Only thinking of themselves. My father doesn't even want us to have a wedding anymore. He thinks we should just go to City Hall. Screw that. We're having a good time. If he wants to sit at home and be miserable, he's welcome to. He hasn't worked except for one day since Tammy died. He's wallowing in his own misery and fucking me over. It sounds awful on paper, but I know you'll really see what I'm saying. Tammy always said last year that she wanted a forest green Porsche for her 16th birthday. Now my dad keeps saying I would have bought it for her if I'd only known. That's bull. If he really felt like that, he'd be paying for my wedding, because I could die tomorrow, or next year, or whenever. He's such a liar.
Karla was more concerned about marrying the man who assaulted and killed her sister than she was about her family's loss. Though Karla would claim that she was forced to assault her sister, a tape would later find that her contentious sentencing would prove otherwise. Titled Fireside Chats, the tape showed footage of Karla and Paul engaging in sex, and during the acts, as mentioned before, Karla was wearing her dead sister's clothes and pretending to be her. The vulgar, unbelievable exchanges between the couple included Karla enthusiastically telling Paul that she loved watching him assault her sister. From this inhumane point, things only escalated. On June 7th of 1991, Karla invited a 15-year-old girl to her and Paul's home. They drugged her and assaulted her. When she, like Tammy, began to choke on her own vomit, the couple called 911. However, this time the ambulance was called off because they had managed to somehow get her breathing. And who's to say if perhaps the ambulance had arrived, an investigation could very well have taken place, and Leslie Mahaffey too would still be alive. It was June 14th, 1991, just a week after the 15-year-old girl's assault. 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey was attending the wake of a close friend. At the wake, she comforted her friends, gave them a shoulder to cry on, and even brought smiles to some mourning faces. She then attended a party in that friend's memory late into the night. But upon arriving home at 2 a.m., she realized her front door was locked and that she didn't have her house key. Not wanting to disturb her parents' sleep, Leslie walked to a gas station to use the phone in an attempt to try and find a friend's house to stay at. Unbeknownst to her, of course, just nearby, Paul was stealing license plates off cars. When he spotted Leslie and saw that she was all alone, he knew that he had his next victim. Paul snuck up from behind Leslie, threw a sweatshirt over her head, and forced her into his car with a knife. Then he drove her home to the house that he and Karla shared. Over the next 2 days, he brutally assaulted Leslie with Karla's help.
I know she was very scared because I'm pretty sure she knew that she was going to die. And she was crying and saying, I just want to see my little brother again. I gave her a teddy bear to hold on to comfort her.
But it wasn't the 14-year-old begging to see her brother and holding a teddy bear for comfort that hurt Karla the most. What did was that Paul took a liking to Leslie.
I was really mad too because when I took Buddy out, there were 2 champagne glasses on the dining room table. And we had these really expensive champagne glasses from France, which we never used. He had those out. The 2 of them had been drinking champagne from those glasses. And I was really mad.
For 24 more long hours, Leslie was locked up and assaulted in ways too sickening to mention. And when Paul was finished with her, he allegedly wrapped an electrical cord around her neck and strangled her.
And then she took a breath. And that freaked me out even more. He should have slapped me in the face because I was really hysterical then. So he went over to her and he did the same thing. He strangled her more. And I think I watched that time. Because what the hell, she's dead anyway.
The 2 then moved Leslie's body into the basement in order to conceal her death, managing to do all of this while simultaneously hosting a Father's Day dinner upstairs. Once everyone left, Paul and Karla then dismembered Leslie with a circular saw, encased her body in blocks of concrete, and disposed of them at the nearby Lake Gibson. It was on Paul and Karla's wedding day that Leslie's body was discovered. But once again, death, torture, pain, But that's not what upset Karla the most on her special day. Though Karla had already assisted Paul in the assault and killing of 2 people, including her little sister, she still describes her wedding night as the worst night of her life.
He wasn't loving. He acted like he didn't care that we got married. He told me that he was a Scarborough rapist. And it just was not like the kind of wedding night that other things were having.
Despite what she describes as a horrible wedding, she at the time continued to do anything that she could to gain Paul's approval and to make their already crumbling marriage work. On April 16th of 1992, that meant helping him kidnap 15-year-old Kristen French.
What really gets tough is if you think of the things that will never come. The fact that she'll never marry, won't be able to plan a wedding. She was at a wedding a couple years ago, and when they went trying on bridesmaids' dresses, she found a wedding gown that she just loved. And I says, well, try it on, Kristen. So she tried it on, and she looked so beautiful.
Kristen was a grade 9 student with good friends, a loving family, and like Tammy and Leslie, also had a bright future ahead of her. When she wasn't competitively ice skating, she was rowing with her school team. When Kristen was walking home from school on that fateful Tuesday, Karla and Paul just happened to be on the prowl for their next victim. Upon spotting her, they pulled into a church parking lot so Karla could approach Kristen and attempt to lure her, a tactic not foreign to the devious couple. Karla approached Kristen and pretended that she needed directions. As Kristen kindly gave them to her, Paul abruptly snuck behind her and put a knife to her back, forcing her into the car. They then headed to their home. During the drive, Karla willingly held 15-year-old Kristen down so she couldn't be seen by pedestrians or anyone in passing vehicles. Once they got Kristen to the house, they held her captive for 3 days, abusing her in every way possible, humiliating her, degrading her, and also forcing her to consume drugs and alcohol. In the beginning, Kristen pretended to like her assailants in order to hopefully gain their favor and escape. Kristen's intellect and bravery shined brightest when she had kept her composure, even as Karla threatened her with a rubber mallet.
I never should have gotten to know Kristen, because you get emotionally involved with these people, and it really hurts. It hurts a lot more, because I felt like I was friends with both of them, especially Kristen, because we did so much stuff together. We put makeup on together. We talked, just girl talk when Paul was gone getting us food, and it just made it hurt even more.
As the captivity and abuse continued, Kristen's patience dwindled. It became apparent that she was no longer able to tolerate or subject herself to the mental and physical torture that she'd been enduring for days now. It was at this breaking point she would say to Paul,
"Some things are worth dying for. I don't know how your wife can stand to be around you."
Tired of her resistance, Paul and Karla murdered Kristen on April 19th of 1992. When her body was discovered abandoned in a ditch, the entire province of Ontario was in a state of shock.
I'd had one nightmare, and that was right after they found her. And I could just hear her crying out to me, and I couldn't find her.
By January, Bernardo and Homolka's toxic and not to mention violent relationship would finally come to an end. And this was after Paul reportedly beat Karla with a flashlight, sending her to the hospital. And yet, Karla would, despite this incident and the conclusion of their relationship, later make this comment about seeing Paul at trial.
"I'm letting my bangs grow. After all, I want to look my absolute best when I go to court and see Paul. I want him to drool when he sees me."
On February 17th of 1993, Paul Bernardo was arrested when his DNA was matched to that of the Scarborough rapist. Their facade as a perfect couple had crumbled like a house of cards. Very quickly, Paul and Karla were both questioned regarding not just the Scarborough rapes, but also the deaths of Tammy, Leslie, and Kristen. The couple would at this point become desperate, and Karla knew that videos existed of all the assaults. But what she didn't know was where Paul had hidden them. Police searched the house but would later fail to find the tapes. Reason being was that Paul told his lawyer to retrieve them from above the light fixture in the bathroom ceiling. and he dutifully did so, helping Paul conceal major evidence. Meanwhile, Karla claimed that she was a battered spouse who took no part in the assaults, stating that she was forced to sexually abuse the victims, and if she had refused, she said Paul would either threaten to beat or even kill her. Karla was offered a plea deal in return for telling police every detail that she knew about Paul's illegal activities, and she would only have to serve 12 years in prison. And in July of 1993, Karla pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter and began serving her time. In September of 1994, the tapes depicting the assaults of Kristen, Tammy, and Leslie were handed over to police by Paul's new lawyer. These tapes showed in detail just how involved Karla was in the horrific crimes. Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison for 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as dozens of charges related to abuse of a corpse, assault, and child abuse. The public was outraged when they learned the truth of Karla's involvement in the murders. Everywhere, psychiatrists and legal authorities argued about whether Karla was a battered spouse or a willing participant in the crimes.
She was a naive, simple, innocent, helpless child who was impressed by what her parents thought of her catch and what her little girlfriends thought of her catch. She was overwhelmed by this fellow.
I had some real doubts about the battered spouse syndrome and the fact that she had been acting under duress in relation to what she admitted she did.
Upon Karla's release from prison, all eyes were on her.
Justement, Karla Homolka, vous êtes détenue depuis 12 ans pour des crimes qui ont fait couler beaucoup d'encre dans tout ce pays. Et avec tout ce battage médiatique qui a eu lieu ces derniers jours, comment s'est passée cette sortie de prison?
Je pense que je réalise pas encore que je suis sortie. Je suis énervée, je suis nerveuse, anxieuse. C'est difficile de décrire ça.
For years now, Karla has tried to remake her life. She married the brother of her defense attorney, has 3 kids, and has even attempted numerous times to volunteer at her children's school in Montreal. And in an attempt to cover up her dark past, she has gone by several names since her release, including Karla Leanne Teal and Leanne Bordelais. And for members of the society in which she lives now, important questions remain. After someone has done something so evil, do they deserve redemption of any kind? And does Karla Homolka deserve a comfortable life, or does she instead deserve to be behind bars like Paul Bernardo? If you found this episode interesting, then our previous episode about a cannibalistic, Satan-worshipping murderer is likely to do the same. You can find it at the end screen of this video.